Okay, folks, I think we're ready to go. Welcome to the Human Services Committee meeting. It's Wednesday, September 7th, 2016. It is about 6:07, and we do have a quorum. First item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes of August 1st. Is there a motion to approve or change, or is there a second? Okay, any additions or changes? Okay, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, we don't have anyone signed up for citizen comments, so if there's anyone here who wants to comment, please come forward. Otherwise, okay, we'll go on with the items for consideration. The first is HH1, police complaint reviews. Staff recommends acceptance of the Evanston Police Department complaint reviews from August 2016. It's for action. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, and Alderman Miller.
Commander Wright. So I'm not sure if you were here a year ago. We had a discussion about biking. In the sense, you were here. You were just transitioning into the role.
Approximately November. I'm not sure when a discussion.
That's when you came and see it. Well, we had a conversation last year about biking where we had similar instances, kind of to what happened in this complaint, where some kids felt that they were being profiled and harassed as a result of biking. We had a conversation where it was said that those kids were riding their bikes in targeted enforcement zones for stealing of bikes. This one really troubles me now because it doesn't seem like, if you read the officers, and I understand why the complaint was actually unfounded because the individual didn't continue it, but the fact that this is coming up again, and by the way, what we did last year was I asked for the bike citations, and we had an overwhelming, I think it was like 150, 180 citations that were issued for riding on sidewalks in downtown Evanston, and then it was 3 for anything else, including riding without a light. So to see this again, and the individual supposedly, the officer said that burglars actually ride at night without bikes or bike lights, and then that's a reason to stop the individual and search him. That's really troubling to me again, because now we've had 2 instances where the individuals riding bikes were allegedly suspicious for some reason for not having a light on their bikes. So I don't know if you care to respond in that regard, but I really am right now, because it doesn't make sense to me to have an ordinance that the only purpose of the ordinance is to stop individuals from riding without a bike if they're under suspicion of something else, so we never actually use it for the proper purpose. So I don't know how you care to respond to that.
Quite honestly, I'm not sure what the question is. You want how to respond to what's the question?
Well, then the question is this: why are our officers stopping individuals who are riding bikes without lights on them under suspicion of other crimes? And how does that give you probable cause to stop and potentially search someone for riding without a light? Not you specifically, I'm saying the officers involved.
Well, I believe the ordinance in itself, the absence of a bicycle light is a violation of the ordinance, and that's the reason to stop the individual and cite them.
But in terms of a search?
As far as a search, other circumstances would dictate a search in this investigation. I know the particulars of this one was the complainant in this case did not immediately stop when the officers requested him to, so that was raised their suspicion as well. As a matter of fact, according to the officer's memorandum, it took him over 2 blocks to stop. And after stopping, there was some evasive behavior as well.
Well, and like I said a year ago, too, I'd be really upset if I was stopped for riding without a light as well. I get an individual not being happy with, under those circumstances, being upset. And I also understand, the idea is we have limited police resources. And I would say to myself, like, really, you're stopping me for this, And the officer, there was 2 officers involved. The second officer said, and he actually said this, he said, we believe or burglars actually sometimes ride without lights to evade custody. So in essence, he was looking at this as more than just a bike citation. This is, to me, if the second time in 2 years we're using this ordinance for this purpose, it's not a public safety issue now, or ordinance. It's actually becoming more a police tool for potential other uses. And I'll reserve, if anyone else has any questions on this, that's great. If not, I'd like to actually ask our legal counsel to do something.
Okay. Does anyone, I have a comment about that, and we have quarterly board meetings, and at the board meetings, there are always issues about bicycles, whether they're bicycles on the sidewalks or bicycles on the street, but not behaving in a very safe manner. And I've actually been very thankful that the police have stopped people who don't have lights on, because the last thing I want, or for anyone who lives in my ward or within the city, is to hit someone on a bicycle. So I know that there have been some citations in my ward for inappropriate bicycle behavior, and if you heard the people at my ward meeting, you'd know that this is a real priority, not only in the downtown, but also near the L stops going to and from campus. So it's been stressed to the police department on a regular basis that this is something that that the public really not only appreciates but expects the police officers to do. I mean, I'm just speaking for my ward and what my constituents say. So,
and I would say that, you know, it's one thing to stop someone and say, hey, you know, we have an ordinance for you have to have a light or whatever the ordinance violation is, you know, in a sense. But we've never cited people for those. Like I said, last year it was like 150 to 3 or something like that. And if we're using these ordinances as a means to stop someone and to potentially search them for other crimes, based on a suspicion to me, you know, again, the report said that burglars sometimes ride bikes without lights. That to me is wrong. So, I mean, if we're going to use it as a way for public safety to actually improve, you know, life or, you know, improve safety in that sense, I'm all for it. But we now have 2 times where there's been complaints that, you know, based on it's called selective enforcement and citation of riding without a light. And that's my problem with it.
I think I can understand what you're saying, and why don't, I'll just say really briefly before Alderman Holmes speaks, that is a conversation that perhaps sometimes police have with people who they stop, or people who have been the victims of some sort of problem. And I think that's, I mean, when I've heard that from people, it's more in terms of the police are educating the people who are complaining. Again, this is just in my ward what I hear from folks, and they've actually appreciated that information and interpreted it in a different way. So, Alderman Holmes, maybe we all have different experiences.
I have to admit that when I first read it, I thought about last year too, because it had reminded me of the conversation that we had had. However, I think the circumstances are really different, Brian, and I think that probably since we're not there, we don't know. If I remember correctly, he did not stop until he was given the second command. And so you don't know what's going to happen with that. And then they smelled alcohol. So wouldn't that be a reason then to search him? I don't know. I have no idea. But, I mean, that was in the report.
Well, I don't believe having alcohol in your breath is a reason to search under suspicion for burglary. If they're doing a public safety search, that's different. But, I mean, were they going to detain him for driving under the influence? Were they going to, was something else involved? Because they ended up only citing, and this is all circumstantial, and we don't know, but, you know, if they ended up only citing him for riding without a light, then
but
these other things that were in there just didn't come up. You know, it wasn't an issue.
But don't you think that was an explanation that sometimes burglars ride without lights? I mean, maybe the question, and that's what I'm saying, you know, we're always second guessing because we're not there. We can only read what's in the report. But if you say, well, why did you stop me? Well, you don't have a front light. And I said, well, why do I need a front light? Or what do you care that I have a front light? Then the conversation might have been, I don't know, because we're not there. But I always try to look at it as fairly as possible to see, you know, I mean, it could have been that kind of conversation. And I think that we have to also look at, you know, from both perspectives, from the, that he did not follow up, you know, always bothers me. Because if you really have a complaint and you think things have not been fair, then, you know, just to follow up is so important.
No, I agree with that too, and I understand the disposition of the complaint that, you know, because there was no follow-up, that it was unfounded or whatever the ruling was. I forgot what it was. I get that too. It's just, it seems to me in this case that we use this ordinance in a way that, you know, it's not been to me meant to be used for. We're using it for other purposes, which is troubling to me.
Well, in this case, Alderman, I believe, looking at the circumstances, the time of night, the initial contact was at Dempster and Elmwood. It took him over 2 blocks to stop. When they stopped him, he was evasive. He was confrontational. So I think in looking at all of those things in the totality, it gave them reasonable suspicion to think that any ordinary person, being asked to stop by the police, it wouldn't take them over 2 blocks to stop, especially being an area where we have a high amount of vehicle burglaries as well as residential burglaries as well. I believe that's what gave them the probable cause to actually conduct a protective pat-down because of his behavior and including a search for reasonable suspicion.
I disagree. Now, I mean, in the sense of, suspicion of burglary, and the second officer in the case wrote that, he said, believe probable cause that people riding without lights are burglars that evade, being stopped. I understand the escalation. If you look at the Terry stop, you're saying reasonable suspicion, you stop, this individual's riding without a light. Okay, that's great. The escalation of it, he smelled alcohol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe that gives you probable cause to search the individual in this case, given the totality of the circumstances. Just being in the area, riding without a light and smelling with alcohol, that's potentially for, driving under the influence or riding under the influence. And they didn't do that.
And not initially stopping when asked or given a lawful command by the police, being confrontational, at the beginning of the stop. I think all of those things compiled together gives the reasonable suspicion.
So then I'd like to do this. Mr. Ford, this is my recommendation. Can you actually prepare an amendment striking the night biking or the night lights on the bike? We can have a discussion of this at council in terms of what we want to do.
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't.
I'd like to remove the requirement that we have bike lights on our bikes and have that considered before council.
Yeah, it's a safety.
I'd like to have this discussion in a sense of what do we want to use these ordinances for. It's the same thing we're having a question about marijuana arrests as well. Are we using those stops, in terms of to actually further escalate, the charges involved? And I just want to have this discussion. Now, I understand the safety issues involved with this, but if we're using these ordinances in an improper way, or maybe we can lessen the penalty, let's discuss how we really want to use this ordinance, because this is the second time we've had a complaint for the use of this ordinance. So I'd like to have the council consider that question.
Alderman Mills noted. We'll work on it and discuss it with you.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, so we're going to vote on acceptance of the police department complaint reviews from August 2016. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay. We're moving on to items for discussion. HH2 is the proposed apiary locations. Human Services Committee requested information regarding potential apiary locations in an effort to support residents who desire to maintain a beehive on their private property, but are prohibited due to lack of abutting neighbor consent. The expectation is to support safe beekeeping practices in Evanston. So that's for discussion. What would you folks like to do?
I'd like to get a better sense of how extensive the list or the search for places was. Both places that were at least recommended in this proposal are along the canal in the 7th Ward, I believe. Is that correct?
That's where they are currently.
Correct. And that's right. But I mean, have we talked about other places or looked citywide for various places?
Good evening, Madam Chair, and to this honorable body, City Council Committee. Lawrence Hemingway, Director of Parks and Recreation. The committee was presented a proposal a couple months ago by colleagues, which had a list of five locations that was recommended to the committee. Based on that discussion, it was sent back to staff. I joined my colleagues in the discussion, and we sat down and we looked. We looked very extensively throughout the city. I do have a aerial of the two locations that we want to present to you and kind of tell you how we came up with these two locations.
It's right there. Where the mouse was. Down. Yes. You can take the mouse. You can take the mouse.
Can we turn off the light? Thanks.
During our discussion, and just let me refresh everyone's memory, the original 5 locations were Harbert Park, Butler Park, Lovelace, James, and Ladd Arboretum. So based upon that original presentation, we went back and we started searching. We looked at throughout our park system. We looked at all the community gardens. We also considered, what the requirements are. We've come up with to govern city, a city-owned space for an apiary. So, looking at that and looking at those requirements, it became very obvious. We couldn't install an apiary in a location that was away 150 feet away from a playscape, away from a sidewalk, away from a pathway, to make sure that the public remained safe. So as we did our evaluations, we came up with the current 2 locations. The first here is Ecclestone Park, which, as you all are aware, is right along the canal area. But I'm sorry. Got it. Well, yeah, it's right across from McCormick, right across from very close to the canal. What you see here in this area here, this is a community garden. So, we knew that was a consideration in trying to identify a location. But just across McCormick is the canal. So you have a close water source. The yellow space here is the area in which we're recommending to build or for apparatus to be installed. We will staff will install a fence, but it is up to the owners who are interested in maintaining or keeping bees to install their actual individual hives. What you have here, though, we've went out and measured. We're more than 150 feet away from this pathway here. The gardens are here, and then the bees' water source is directly across the street to the here to the east. We are far enough away from any play structures or playgrounds, so this is why this location was selected. We go to our next one. So here, I think one of your options originally considered was also Ladd Arboretum, but now what we've done is, since that original discussion, this is the location of the old windmill. That windmill has now been demolished, and so it created an ideal location, far enough away from our public pathways, which is along here. This is not really a public pathway here. This is what staff kind of uses to walk back and forth. But obviously, you see, you're here in a wooded area. You're away from more than 150 feet away from the ecology center. You're right here at a water source. And so we also consider this location as an ideal location for the public to use if we were going to have an apiary installed. And so based on those discussions, based on our requirements as staff, these were the 2 locations that we recommended. So we also, I asked a question, being new to the discussion, how many applications have we received at this point? And at this point, we haven't had anybody asking us for an application. So I believe if these 2 locations are available, we will be able to have a good, safe location that could meet the public's demand if they desire to install a beehive. I'm available for any further questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from the committee? Eleanor? Alderman Ravel?
It occurs to me that the location there at Ecclestone Park might be of great interest to the Edible Evanston group, because they've got an orchard there now, as well as lots of plants that they're growing, and it may very well be that they would really be interested in taking up beekeeping as well. So is the idea that we will just sort of have in mind that these two places are available, and we're not going to build any structures or anything until somebody actually comes to us with a proposal? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Well, we won't build the structures. I mean,
They will
build it. We will just put up the fence.
Put the secured fence up, not build the actual hive itself.
They'll have to do that.
That's up to the owners.
Or we could just wait to build the fence till we see whether there's actually any interest.
Well, yes, I'm sorry. That is correct. We will wait to take any action until we know or been approached of the public expressing their interest.
Okay.
Ms. Thomas-Smith.
Good evening. Yvonne Thomas-Smith, Director, Health and Human Services. And just to add to credit Lawrence and his staff, they were very interested in these locations. Also is that they were nearby possible programming that could operate out of the Ecology Center, so there can be some educational opportunities available if this were to happen. And I just want to remind the committee that the reason why we got into these discussions was that we did have a resident that actually moved his apiary because of non-consent of a neighbor and had to move to Indiana. And so it was the concern of this committee to offer possible locations in the effort that this resident wanted to move his apiary location back into the community, and also to make sure that we were supportive of those pollinators that were very much interested in the case that a neighbor would not consent to have an apiary in the location.
Alderman Tandem?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hemingway. I do think it's a very important offering that we have, like you said, in case someone doesn't meet the requirements or if neighbors object. It seems to me almost more ideal to have it in a common place where if one were to have this in his backyard, then that does eliminate some activity in part of the backyard at least. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad we're offering this and hope we can actually encourage people to do this. It would be a community benefit as well. So thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So do we need to accept the report? It's just for discussion.
It's just for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on to HH3. It's Police Department update on diversity training. It's an update from Dr. Logan on his work with the Police Department. I need to say that there was a request from Alderman Braithwaite to hold this item. Dr. Logan is here, and is there any interest on the part of the committee to hold this? No. Okay, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the courtesy of us going forward this tonight. Dr. Logan's time is extremely valuable and has difficulty, and I am certain he and I will make arrangements to meet with Alderman Braithwaite at his request.
Good, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Alderman. Tonight I'm here with Dr. Logan, who will report on the training he recently provided to the Evanston Police Department, the department's latest effort to keep personnel current in their ability to interact effectively with all members of the community. Prior to Dr. Logan's remarks, I will comment on the context in which this training was provided. For many years, the Evanston Police Department, at a significant investment of both time and resources, has been committed to diversity training in various forms under various titles. For example, we have availed ourselves to the Chicago Police Department's procedural justice training, which their trainers were trained by the Department of Justice. Also, we have had multiple trainings by Dr. Aaron Thompson, who is closely associated with the Illinois Police Training and Standards Board. Additionally, the Department of Justice came out earlier this spring and trained all the supervisors in the police department in a one-day training regarding procedural justice. I view diversity training as an ongoing commitment, not unlike taking daily vitamins rather than a once-in-a-while vaccine. Training needs to be repeated frequently because the events in the policing world and with society at large change trajectory of police-community relations very quickly. Case in point, our post-Ferguson, post-Laquan McDonald world, expectations of law enforcement are radically different than they were pre-Ferguson. Similarly, post-Dallas and post-Baton Rouge world of law enforcement yet again faces situations that are radically different. In reviewing the report Dr. Logan will present tonight, I'm neither surprised nor taken aback by the information it contains. The information reflects the national mood of community members and police alike. Law enforcement is a difficult profession subject to many perspectives and attitudes. You will find those reflected in the comments made here tonight. Through dialogue, progress is made. As a client, a person who has been responsible for ordering training for police officers for an extended period of time, I am pleased to note that Dr. Logan created a situation where there no complaints or concerns were expressed about the training provided. Indeed, my perception is the members of the department embraced the opportunity to discuss this difficult topic with Dr. Logan and their peers. The fact that Dr. Logan was able to provide this level of report was able to establish this level of rapport with the men and women of the Evanston Police Department is a testimony not only his ability to work with officers in small groups and create an environment of trust and understanding so that difficult questions can be addressed, but also a testimony to the officers' willingness to be open to new ideas and concepts, the hallmark of the men and women of the Evanston Police Department. Officers discussing their concerns and issues with their peers in a safe environment can only make the department better. Prior to working through Dr. Logan's report this evening, I want to make clear the roles that he and I play in this issue. Dr. Logan is a highly professional consultant who provides advice to the Chief of Police. I measure his advice against the responsibilities and concerns that I have regarding budget control and other related issues. As Dr. Logan is responsible for providing suggestions, I am responsible for evaluating whether the implementation of those suggestions are appropriate for the police department at this point in time. I want to thank Dr. Logan for the effort that he put into this endeavor. I want to assure you that he and I will be available to answer questions after he presents his report. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Logan. Doctor.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Madam Chair and committee, thank you all for having me here. It's an honor to stand here before you 1 year after making the initial presentation. So my name is Dr. Logan, G-Lo Quasi Logan. I'm a diversity consultant and writer and speaker. And essentially my mission is to help leaders and organizations, teams and individuals to help them meet the challenges of working and living in the global society. My expertise stems from more than 25 years in K through 16 multicultural education, and that includes teaching critical thinking, interpersonal communications, and human relations, and teaching in the Justice Studies Department at Northeastern Illinois University, where I teach and train current and prospective law enforcement officers and agents. Excuse me. Also, my expertise stems from my research in what's called racial and ethnic identity development and multicultural education and culturally relevant pedagogy. Additionally, I've been very honored to have more than 7 years experience living in 22 different countries. And as well, what I brought to this consultancy is the fact that I'm also a fifth generation Evanstonian. I'm a resident of the 5th Ward, and I'm also the son of the former police chief here in Evanston, Bill Logan. So that also helped to inform my practice. So with that, I'd like to provide you all a brief overview of the program. Now, mind you, I'm not going to cover everything, but I'll cover the main points. So to review, the purpose of this program was to really design and develop and implement a diversity and inclusion training program that's relevant to the needs and the conditions and the situation here in Evanston. The aim was to develop awareness and knowledge of the consequences of the systems of differentiation. So in other words, our communities in Evanston live under different conditions, different contexts, and how can we develop an awareness and a knowledge based on that? Thank you. Additionally, the aim was to explore potential bias, prejudice, power, privilege, and experiences with oppression, and a lack of cultural sensitivity. So not to say that that's what there was, but it was to explore the possibility of that. As well, to increase cultural awareness, knowledge, and skills for interacting with different communities and for developing and strengthening partnerships with the community here in Evanston, as well as to show the community that the Evanston Police Department is aware of the issues and training to address them. And lastly, to foster a more positive image of and a partnership between the Evanston Police Department and the communities that it serves. So for the program, essentially what I did is I've had 11 meetings with Mayor Tisdale, the City Council, and different aldermen and alderwomen here in Evanston. Additionally, over 42 hours of meetings with Chief Eddington, Commander Davis, the command staff, and different union representatives. There was, in February of 2016, there was a town hall meeting that I helped to plan and facilitate at the Levy Center here in Evanston. We had approximately 60 to 70 community members in attendance. And as well, I presented at the 5th Ward meeting and numerous discussions with citizens throughout the community. As well, I volunteered to participate in the Citizens Police Academy. I did that as a citizen, but I also did that as a consultant where I felt that that would help inform my practice. Despite being an Evanstonian and coming from a family of law enforcement, I realized there's still lots to learn. So I chose to go through the Citizens Police Academy after my 2 sons participated in the Youth Citizens Police Academy. And with that, I also wanted to build trust with the officers. So the program design, essentially we had 21 2-hour focus groups, and that was to help assess the concerns and the needs and the issues in the officer's own voice. We had between 5 and 7 officers per group. In total, there were 97 participants who participated in the focus groups. There were diverse members who were represented that reflected diversity in terms of unit, age, rank, experience, race and ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. Then as well, in addition to the focus groups and the town hall meeting, there was workshops for the sworn officers. So I planned and facilitated 16 4-hour workshop trainings for the officers. Part 1, 65 officers participated in the first portion and 62 officers participated in the 4-hour training in the second session. Some of the topics that we dealt with in our discussion and in our workshops, for one, was the concept and the notion of identity. So basically how we formulate our own identities, the fact that we all have one, and depending on our positionality, meaning our race, class, sexual orientation, religion, etc., how that influences our perspective and our perceptions of others and the work that we do. So we explored the concept of identity within the police department and also the identity of the Evanston community and how those interface with one another. In addition to that, the notion of categorization and the fact that it's human nature for our brains to categorize information in order to process it. So we took a look at that to see how that may play itself out in terms of how the police department categorizes information about the community that it serves, as well as how does the community categorize information about with their experiences with the Evanston Police Department. And again, I just wanted to underscore the fact that the notion of identity and categorization it's human nature, as well as the third topic, and that was implicit bias. And that's something that's, again, all humans are biased to some degree and in some form, in some fashion. So we just simply explored that to look at how might that look in terms of community and police interactions. We also looked at what's called the matrix of oppression. So basically how we all carry multiple identities and how do they interact with one another in terms of potentially contributing to stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, which lead to possible oppression. And again, we looked at that within the department, we looked at that within our society, and we also explored that within our community here in Evanston. We also explored the concept of stereotype threat. And that is that all people are subject to negative stereotypes about themselves, depending on their identity. Stereotype threat is based on the work of Dr. Claude Steele, and it speaks to a situational predicament in which people are or feel at risk of confirming a negative stereotype about their social group. So again, depending on the positionality of the officers or the positionality of community members, how does that notion of stereotype threat inform and impact the interactions? And lastly, we took a socio-historical, socio-cultural, and socio-economic look at Evanston. And that's where I also provided perspective from my own experience here. And with that, we took a statistical and anecdotal illustration of the diversity here in Evanston, in our communities, as well as through District 65 and District 202. So we looked at the impact of that on our youth. So as far as the findings from the town hall meeting and the input from the community and the city council and different conversations that I've had, what the community identified as strengths of the Evanston Police Department were, one, the responsiveness of the department, the care and support that the department lends and offers the community, the professionalism, and the friendliness. Those are the most prevalent themes throughout. What the community identified as issues or areas of concern with the Evanston Police Department, and again, this is based on a limited sample, but this was the information that we had. One, the community felt that there's an overwhelming, quote unquote, mental ill population permeating the community. Two, that Evanston Police Department officers participate in policing that is racially biased and discriminatory and patronizing towards the African American community, and the community felt that the department is lacking training in that area, as well as working with the population that has mental health challenges. The third one, the African American community is policed differently and more negatively and more aggressively than other communities here in Evanston, and the community felt that training was needed in that area as well. The community expressed that there was a lack of cultural competency, customer service, and interpersonal communication skills amongst the department. And again, that's not to implicate every officer or the department as a whole, but this is what some of the community members voiced. As well, that the Evanston Police Department officers are not being required to live in Evanston. There was lots of passion expressed around that issue. The unresolved crimes and murders here in Evanston. And lastly, the lack of town hall meetings for community members and officers to engage in community-wide discussions on community concerns and issues. So some of the findings from this process, this year-long process: one, that there exists a general misunderstanding, disconnection, mistrust, and lack of discourse between the department and member groups within the community. Number two, diverse groups in the Evanston community hold deeply held views that racism, or at least racial bias, is the root cause of mistrust between the department and communities of color. Number three, people of color, particularly African Americans, reported seeing or having disproportionately more negative experiences with the police. Number four, officers feel strongly that a stronger relationship with the community needs to be forged, and it's essential for the department's effectiveness and the community's safety. Number five, officers hold deeply held views that the community needs to be more accountable in partnering with the department to solve crimes, and the community should hold the department to the highest level of accountability. Officers also believe that a community that knows the law and how it works, and a department that knows the community and how it works, are key ingredients for effective community policing. As well, officers and staff feel that a lack of competencies for effectively engaging with people with mental illness and the African American community and other minority groups. They felt that additional training was needed in that area. And lastly, most officers expressed great concern for the negative effects of stereotype threat on officers and on the community in which they serve. Just to share a few of the recommendations and suggestions that came from this process. So in addition to additional training for the Evanston Police Department in those areas, and in addition to the implications for this within the department, there seems, one of the recommendations is to host a town hall meeting to invite discourse on topics and issues concerning the Evanston Police Department and the community. to learn from one another's experiences, to disseminate information, cultivate trust and transparency, and build community and partnerships with stakeholders. Now, I understand that there's been a number of town hall meetings here in Evanston, but there are different types of town hall meetings, and from what I gathered, the community is asking to have a town hall meeting where the officers or representatives from the department are before them, and they can actually engage in discussion and dialogue around the issues and solicit responses from the police department. Additionally, training for the community to better understand the laws, their rights and responsibilities as citizens, particularly as it pertains to fighting crime and community policing efforts, as well as the impact of social media on crime prevention, and community policing, training for the community in that area. And lastly, to develop accountability for citizens who file unfounded or false complaints. So that's a brief summary of the work that was conducted over the last year. Having said that, I'm honored to have been able to provide that service not only to my community, but whether if I'm from this community or not, to have provided that service to the Evanston Police Department. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for everything that you've given us to chew on. It's really, fascinating and important. Are there any comments from the committee, please? Mr. City Manager, do you need anything from us?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. Let me echo Chief Eddington's comments commending Dr. Logan and his fine report. I think in many cases, fine reports are only made finer when you actually follow what they suggest. And so now I think our challenge is to come back to you with a plan on how we continue. As Chief Eddington said, this is an ongoing process. And I think the comments that you've heard tonight from Dr. Logan are very thoughtful ones. And I think we need, from a city management, police management standpoint, now need to go back and look through those and come up with a plan. So, Madam Chair, perhaps it's appropriate at your next meeting or perhaps in 2 months to come back to you with that. Certainly we're in the process of the budget deliberations. Some of the things that have been suggested are no cost or low cost, and so we're going to focus primarily on those. But I think as we look what additional professional training is appropriate, we want to make sure that that's budgeted appropriately. So,
well, I think that I do want to be moving forward with this. I don't want anyone to think that we're thanking Dr. Logan for his report and then going on about our business. We want to really keep this in front of the committee. So I think an update from staff about what we're doing, where we're going, next steps should be part of every upcoming Human Services Committee meeting. This is my last meeting as chair. I'm not, is Alderman Tendem next chair? So that would be my recommendation to the next chair, is just to keep us moving along.
And perhaps Alderman Fisk, members of the committee, what we could do is come back with a plan for the following next fiscal year 2017. So, and then maybe have as part of your standing reports an update over the course of 2017, the progress that's being made on that implementation. So, Chief Eddington and I haven't had an opportunity really to talk about logistics, but certainly I would think in the next month or so we could come back at your October meeting with the committee's concurrence with the beginnings of that, and perhaps come back in November with a final plan after you've had a chance to look at a draft and discuss it amongst the committee, and then move forward with it in 2017.
Okay, Alderman Tendem, then Alderman Holmes.
Thank you. As far as community meetings, we did have a program for a while where our problem-solving team officer, or beat cop, as some would call, did have smaller meetings in the wards. I think they were fairly ward or beat specific. But and I think what the difference between that and our officers do a great job at our ward meetings in terms of being there and presenting statistics and handling other issues. And the chief was at my last ward meeting and gave quite a lengthy presentation on the status of the current issues in the city. But having that meeting that was specifically intended for the officer to meet the public, and there was no other agenda. There was nothing about beehives or any other ward issues, Loveless Park or whatever it was, playing soccer fields. I mean, it was specifically that, and it got a turnout that was specifically interested in talking and getting to know the officer. And it wasn't always a problem. It was or issues based. It was a lively conversation of life in Evanston and what we expect from our officers and how we like working with them and what we expect. So I think the officer also learned a lot from the community in that situation as well. So I know we can always put together a pretty large community meeting, but the local ward or beat meeting was very effective, from my point of view, in something completely different, or more or less completely different from what we do at our ward meetings. So I would encourage that as well as any other kind of community meetings. It would be very helpful. Thank you, and thank you for your report tonight.
Alderman Holmes?
Well, first off, I just want to see how we got here, and thinking about the training with Dr. Thompson a couple of years back, in terms of knowing that we needed to keep moving forward, and I hope we will continue to do that. So, City Manager, as we plan training and really listening to some of the details from the community as well as from the police department, that we look at that in terms of budget and put that as a top priority. That's one thing. Secondly, followed up on what Alderman Tindem said, we regularly in the 5th Ward schedule twice a year to have the police department there for an update from the chief or one of the deputy chiefs, and to talk about cold cases, crime statistics, whatever. And we're doing this on the 15th again this year. We usually use September, and then we try to do it again in early spring, just to keep that going. I wanted to ask Dr. Logan, though. I was trying to think of a question when Judy asked anybody have a question. I wonder, what is your impression of the police officers in terms of the training and the requests from the community about town hall meetings? And in terms of what kind of description did they give of a town hall meeting? And I say that only because we have all different kinds of, as you said, different kinds of town hall meetings, and everybody has a story. We know those kind, and everybody wants to tell their story. But are we talking about the topic focused town hall meetings? What? And I just want to know what their reaction to that is.
Sure. In preface to answering your question, if I could say that both numerous members in the community, as well as police officers, expressed a concern that, okay, we've had this training, we have this report, what's going to come of it? Mm-hmm. And there was some skepticism around that. So I think for action to be had based upon these recommendations would serve the community well, would serve the department well, regardless of who's facilitating that process, for one. For two, specifically what people were expressing to me was and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but an issues-oriented dialogue and discussion with the department. Many people felt that at the town hall meeting, they were able to come, dialogue amongst themselves within their individual wards. They were able to express their concerns, but they felt what was lacking was the lack of dialogue and discourse and feedback from the department, and that's what they were really seeking, to get responses from the department, to get answers to specific questions. So I would say an issues-based, again, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but an issues-based dialogue and discourse around topics of discussion here in Evanston. And as well, which I think was part of your initial question, if I can say that as a citizen here in the community, I'm extremely proud of my community because we have so many people who care. And despite however people may express that, but underlying the fact is that people are passionate about their community and the fact that they care. And that's important to have that in order to be able to work with. And then on the other side, having had the honor to work with the department as a citizen in the community, I'm also very proud and honored to have a police department as fine as we have here in Evanston. I mean, it's not perfect by any measure, but it's a great police department, and there's a number of officers who care, who are passionate about their work. And I think if we can match that concern, match that passion, I really think there's opportunities to do great work here at Evanston. Additional work. Did I answer your question? No. Okay.
Alderman Miller?
Dr. Logan, who's doing this well? What communities are having these conversations and this process, and who can we look to for best practices?
That's a great question. And in all honesty, I have not found, to my knowledge, one community that is doing it like Evanston is. There was a very extensive process that went on, and the chief could speak to this better than I can. How many different units, how many different departments, different shifts, how it was an all-encompassing process, and to the degree that it invited the community into the process and the extent of the service. So it wasn't. So my approach is not prescriptive. So I didn't come in and prescribe the medicine to fix the problems. And it wasn't me to tell the community or the department what was wrong. But I think what additionally was unique about this is the fact that the community had the opportunity to express their concerns in the manner in which they did, coupled with officers being able to do the same thing and putting both of those together and formulating that into the training. So honestly speaking, I have not seen another community that I'm aware of that's doing it as Evanston is. And if there is, I would love to know of it. Sure.
Alderman, to add to the doctor's comments, I think that other communities will look to us to see how to do this with a unique resource we had with Dr. Logan, and to bring him into the community he's familiar with. Even as talented as Dr. Thompson is, trying to explain Evanston in 3 days is not happening. And so that knowledge, community knowledge, is invaluable. And I think as other communities go forward to become compliant with the newly passed Community Safety Act by the state of Illinois, will be the model. They will come to us. Thank you.
Yeah, that was what really my comment was about how we got here with Dr. Logan, is because we knew that, and the chief was just so receptive to and finding someone who could do it here, who really understood our community and knew about our community. I think it was very unique, and very proud of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All righty. Well, are there any items of communication other than this is my last?
Mark will let you continue if you want, Judy.
No, Mark needs to do this. Okay, anything, Yvonne?
No, we just wanted to thank you for your leadership and remind you that Alderman Tindem will be the next chair for the October 4th meeting.
Good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, then is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much.